All right, let's step into a world of powdered wigs and some seriously intense philosophical debate. Because today we're diving deep into 18th century French aesthetics.
Ooh,
We're using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on the topic as our guide. And you've got all these brilliant minds in France wrestling with beauty. What is it? How do we experience it? And who gets to decide what's good taste?
it's such a vibrant period, because France is really trying to position itself as the heir to this classical tradition of ancient Greece and Rome. But they're not just copying the ancients. They're
Yeah.
questioning, they're refining, and ultimately they're forging their own path.
Yeah, they're like, okay, we love Aristotle, we love Horace, but we also have this whole feeling thing happening. So
Exactly.
let's start with that classical inheritance because it really is like the bedrock they're building on.
Well, think of it this way. French intellectuals saw themselves as continuing this conversation that began centuries ago. They were obsessed with figures like Aristotle, Horace, and Plutarch, and they believed that these ancient thinkers had laid out these fundamental principles of art and beauty.
But then comes this huge intellectual brawl, the quarrel of the ancients and the moderns.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't just some dusty academic debate, it was like a philosophical cage match.
It really was a fundamental question about the nature of progress.
Okay.
Were humans getting better, or were they losing the wisdom of the past?
Hmm.
The moderns argued that new inventions and scientific discoveries proved progress.
Right?
They even claimed that French manners and etiquette were more refined than the, shall we say, less civilized behavior of the ancient gods.
Oh, it's hilarious to imagine them comparing like Zeus's antics to a French peasant.
All right.
But were these moderns really trying to like throw out the classics altogether?
Not at all. They
No.
still respected the ancient texts and traditions. I mean, the core of their education was based on them.
Right.
The debate was more about how to interpret and apply those rules in a rapidly changing world. Think of it like having a beloved old recipe. You might tweak it a bit to suit modern tastes, but you're not throwing out the whole cookbook.
Okay, that's a great analogy.
Right.
So while this quarrel is raging on, we also have this other trend taking off. Salon culture. Imagine these elegant gatherings in like aristocratic homes where the elite are discussing art, literature, and of course taste.
Oh, and this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Thinkers like Dominique Bouart, a regular in these salons, started emphasizing the importance of feeling in aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
He even coined the term je ne sais quoi, which literally means I don't know what.
It's that indescribable something that makes art captivating, right? Like you can't explain it with rules, you just feel it.
Exactly. It's like a spark, a sudden connection that draws you in.
Mm-hmm.
And this concept tied directly into the idea of politeness and refined taste, which were seen as essential qualities of the upper class.
So it wasn't just about following the rules, it was also about having this innate sensibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's like having a good eye for fashion. You just know it when you see it.
Precisely. And thinkers like the Abbé Dubois and the Marquise de Lambert took this idea of feeling even further.
Okay.
They argued that taste was a sixth sense, a physical response to beauty that went beyond mere intellect.
It's not just in your head, it's in your gut.
Right.
Like feeling chills down your spine when you hear a beautiful piece of music or being moved to tears by a powerful painting.
But here's a crucial point. While they emphasize this individual, subjective experience of beauty, they weren't exactly throwing open the doors to everyone.
Right. It's still an aristocratic world.
Right?
The lower classes were still considered incapable of having this refined sensibility.
Exactly. Their ideas reflect the social hierarchies of the time.
Mm.
They were pushing for a more nuanced and emotional understanding of beauty, but within the context of their own privileged world.
Okay, so we've got the classicists with their rules
Mm-hmm.
and the salon set with their feelings.
Right.
But there's another group we need to bring into the mix, the Cartesians.
Oh.
They're taking a very different approach.
This is where things get a bit more, shall we say, methodical.
Okay.
The Cartesians, followers of René Descartes, believed in applying reason and logic to understand beauty.
Mhm.
Thinkers like Jean-Pierre de Crousaz argued that taste wasn't arbitrary, but anticipated what reason would eventually conclude if it had enough time to analyze every detail.
It's like they're trying to create a mathematical formula for beauty.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
They believed there were universal principles at play,
Mm.
and that beauty was ultimately linked to truth and God's divine wisdom.
Mm.
It's a very different way of thinking about aesthetics compared to the je ne sais quoi crowd.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But even within the Cartesian camp, there are different interpretations.
of course.
Charles Bateau, for example, focused on mimesis. the idea of imitating beautiful nature.
But he wasn't just talking about like slavishly copying nature.
Right.
For Bateau, the artist's job was to select and arrange elements from nature to reveal its underlying beauty and essence.
So it's like the artist is curating nature's greatest hits, right? But then doesn't that raise the question, what makes those particular aspects of nature beautiful in the first place?
Ah, good question.
Are we back to subjective judgment again?
Exactly. These debates keep circling back to these fundamental questions.
Yeah.
What is beauty? And who has the authority to define it?
And that brings us to the Enlightenment, where a new group of thinkers, the Philosophes, step onto the stage.
Enter stage left.
Thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and of course Diderot saw themselves as the new arbiters of taste. They were trying to combine reason and sentiment with a deep understanding of the rules laid out by the ancients.
Right.
And Diderot, in his entry on Beau, Beauty, in the Encyclopédie, really tackles this head-on.
He does.
He points out that the definition of beauty is often circular. It's beautiful because it pleases, and it pleases because it's beautiful.
It's a philosophical merry-go-round.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
He challenges this circular logic by arguing that our ideas about beauty come from observation and experience, not from some innate knowledge.
Right.
And this is where his concept of rapport comes in.
Rapports. Interesting.
It essentially means connections or relationships.
Okay.
Diderot believed that the more you understand the context and the connections within a work of art, the deeper your appreciation will be.
I see.
So it's not just about the surface appearance, it's about understanding the underlying structure and meaning. Like seeing how different elements work together to create a harmonious whole.
Precisely. He even uses a single line from Corneille's play Horace,
Okay.
qu'il mourut, meaning that he had died, to illustrate this. On the surface, it's a simple sentence.
Right.
But when you understand the context of the play, the
Yeah.
relationships between the characters, the weight of the situation, that simple line becomes incredibly powerful.
Wow, it's like a single brushstroke in a painting that takes on new meaning when you see the whole canvas.
Exactly. And this is where Diderot's role as an art critic comes into play.
Okay.
He believed that criticism was vital for helping people see these connections and appreciate art on a deeper level.
He was like a guide, helping people navigate the complex world of art and unlock its hidden meanings. And from what I've read, he was a brilliant writer.
Absolutely. His descriptions of art are so vivid and engaging.
Yeah.
He doesn't just tell you what he sees, he makes you feel like you're right there in the gallery with him, experiencing the artwork firsthand.
And this brings us to the visual arts themselves, where we see a similar shift happening. Artists are gaining more authority and are no longer seen as mere artisans.
Right.
Louis XIV had established the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture,
Yes.
which played a significant role in elevating the status of artists.
It did.
They were now considered intellectuals and tastemakers, not just skilled craftsmen.
Right.
And of course, with this newfound authority comes, well, more debate.
Always.
This time, it's between the Poussinists and the Rubenists.
Uh-huh.
The Poussinists, named after the painter Nicolas Poussin, favored line and drawing as the most important elements in painting.
Okay.
They saw line as intellectual and expressive, while color was considered merely sensual and decorative.
Interesting.
And the Rubenists, following Peter Paul Rubens, championed color and its ability to evoke emotion and create a sense of movement and drama.
So it was like a battle between head and heart.
Yes, reason and passion.
Right.
Exactly.
And art critic Roger de Piles jumped into the fray,
He did.
arguing that color was actually more important
Okay.
because it had a more direct and powerful effect on the viewer. He believed that true painting didn't just surprise you, it called to you, demanding your attention through its sheer visual impact.
It's interesting how this ties back to that concept of je ne sais quoi.
Yes.
It's that immediate, visceral response to beauty that can't be explained by rules alone.
Precisely. And this period also saw the rise of art amateurs and connoisseurs who played a crucial role in shaping public taste. They were collecting, cataloging, and even reproducing art through engravings and prints, making it accessible to a wider audience.
They were like the early art historians and influencers, paving the way for a more widespread appreciation of art.
And then, of course, we have the birth of the Salon in 1737.
Oh, yes.
This was a game changer because it was the first time that the public had access to art on such a grand scale.
It was like the blockbuster exhibition of its day. Everyone who was anyone flocked to the Salon to see and be seen.
And this led to the rise of art criticism as we know it.
Okay.
People were writing reviews, sharing their opinions, and debating the merits of different artists and styles.
Like the birth of the art blogosphere.
Exactly. The Salon created a buzz and a platform for engaging with art in a public and critical way. And it's here that we see Diderot really come into his own as an art critic.
He believed that the critic had a vital role to play in bridging the gap between the artist and the audience.
Yeah.
Especially when it came to painting, where the technical skill involved could be difficult for the average viewer to grasp.
He saw criticism as a form of translation, using words to capture the essence of a painting and make it more accessible and meaningful to a wider audience.
And he was a master of this. His writing is so vivid and evocative.
Absolutely.
For instance, he described the work of Chardin, the still life painter, as pure magic.
He had a way of making you feel like you were right there in the room with him, experiencing the textures, the light, the very essence of the painting. He was a true champion of the visual arts.
So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, we've seen how 18th century France was a melting pot of ideas about beauty.
It was.
From the legacy of the ancients to the rise of feeling, from the logic of the Cartesians to the emergence of the art critic. It was a period of intense debate and transformation.
And we can't forget the emergence of two major artistic styles that were battling it out for dominance.
Oh, right.
Rococo and Neoclassicism.
Rococo, think Boucher's playful scenes and delicate brushstrokes.
Yeah.
It was all about lightheartedness and sensual pleasure.
While Neoclassicism, with its emphasis on moral virtue and heroic themes, harked back to the grandeur of ancient Greece and Rome.
And as France hurtled towards revelation, these competing visions of beauty would become entangled with the political and social upheaval of the time.
It's a fascinating story, and we'll pick it up right where we left off in part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
All right. Welcome back to our deep dive into 18th century French aesthetics.
Last time we left off with this fascinating clash of styles, the playful indulgence of Rococo and the moral gravitas of Neoclassicism.
And as we hinted at, it was Neoclassicism that ultimately triumphed, at least in terms of critical acclaim and its influence on the political landscape.
It makes sense, doesn't it? The French Revolution was all about reason, civic duty, and harking back to the ideals of the Roman Republic.
Right.
So neoclassical art, with its emphasis on heroism and virtue, really resonated with the spirit of the times.
It's incredible how art can become so intertwined with politics. You know those iconic images of revolutionaries draped in togas, evoking figures like Cincinnatus?
Right.
Those weren't just aesthetic choices.
Right.
They were deliberate attempts to connect the revolution to a glorious past and legitimize their cause through art.
It's like they were creating a new mythology for a new era.
Exactly.
Speaking of new eras, we also touched on the emergence of public museums, which was a total game changer for how people experienced art.
Think about it. Before this, art was largely confined to private collections, royal palaces, churches.
Right.
Only a select few had access to these treasures. But with the opening of public museums like the British Museum in 1759, the Uffizi in 1765, and of course the Louvre in 1793, art became accessible to everyone regardless of their social standing.
Imagine, for the first time, ordinary citizens could walk into a grand hall and stand face-to-face with masterpieces that had previously been hidden behind closed doors.
It was a radical shift,
Yeah.
and it really democratized the experience of art.
Right. And it wasn't just about physical access either.
No.
The 18th century saw this huge boom in printed materials,
Yes.
like art books, catalogs, engravings, which further spread knowledge and appreciation of art.
Right. Those early art connoisseurs we talked about,
Yeah.
like Pierre Crozat, weren't just hoarding these masterpieces.
Right.
They were documenting them, writing about them, creating a visual record that could be shared with a wider audience.
It's like they were laying the groundwork for art history as we know it.
Exactly.
And this shift had a profound impact on how people understood and appreciated art.
Yeah.
It wasn't just something to be admired for its beauty.
Right.
It became something to be studied, analyzed, debated.
It's like art was moving out of the salon and into the public square, sparking conversations, challenging people to think critically about what they were seeing.
And this brings us back to that central question we've been grappling with. What is beauty?
Yeah.
In the 18th century, that question was being asked with more urgency and from a wider range of perspectives than ever before.
We've gone from rigid rules inherited from the ancients to the rise of feeling and individual perception.
Right.
From the logical approach of the Cartesians to the emergence of the art critic as a guide and interpreter.
And the very notion of taste was evolving.
Revise.
It was no longer simply about adhering to established standards or imitating the elite. It was becoming more subjective, more nuanced, more open to individual interpretation.
And this shift, as we've seen, was happening alongside massive social and political upheavals. It's
Yeah.
like the entire foundation of how beauty was understood and experienced was being shaken up.
And that's incredibly exciting.
It is.
It paved the way for the explosion of artistic movements and critical theories that would follow in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Absolutely.
Without this period of questioning and redefinition, we wouldn't have Impressionism, Cubism, abstract art,
Right.
any of the incredible artistic innovations that followed.
Exactly.
So let's pause here for a moment and consider this question. If beauty really is in the eye of the beholder, how much does context and education shape our perceptions? What do you think?
It's a question that has haunted philosophers and art critics for centuries, and there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
On the one hand, we all have our own individual tastes and preferences shaped by our personal experiences and cultural background.
Right.
But on the other hand, our understanding of art is also shaped by the knowledge we acquire, the historical context we learn about, and the way we're taught to see and interpret art.
Think about your own experiences with art.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever encountered a work that you initially didn't like,
Yeah.
but then after learning more about the artist, the historical period, or the techniques used, you found yourself appreciating it on a whole new level?
It happens all the time,
Yeah.
and that's the beauty of art. It's a
Yeah.
journey of discovery.
Yeah.
It challenges us to question our assumptions, expand our horizons, and engage with the world in new and meaningful ways.
And that's why this deep dive into 18th century French aesthetics is so relevant.
It is.
It reminds us that art is never static, that our understanding of beauty is constantly evolving,
Right.
and that the questions we ask are just as important as the answers we find.
Absolutely.
What else can we say about this pivotal period in art history?
It was a period of incredible dynamism and intellectual ferment.
Yeah.
The lines between artist, critic, and viewer were becoming increasingly blurred. And the conversation about art was expanding to include a wider range of voices and perspectives.
And this sense of dynamism and openness really laid the groundwork for the modern art world as we know it.
It did.
Before we wrap up this second part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to encourage you to do some exploring of your own.
Oh, absolutely.
Visit a local museum, pick up an art history book,
Yeah.
or even just browse online.
Yeah.
Look at art from different periods and cultures and really consider what speaks to you and why.
Absolutely. Engage with art on your own terms. Ask questions, challenge your assumptions, and don't be afraid to have your own opinions. That's how we keep the conversation about art alive and relevant.
Well said. We'll be back in just a bit to wrap up our deep dive into 18th century French aesthetics.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned for more insights and thought-provoking questions. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into 18th century French aesthetics.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has.
From those rigid rules inherited from the ancients to the salons buzzing with this concept of feeling,
Right.
from the Cartesians trying to apply logic to beauty to the birth of the art critic.
It's been amazing to trace how the very definition of beauty was being challenged and reshaped during this period.
It's like watching a flower bloom in time lapse.
Yes.
You see all these subtle shifts and transformations happening before your eyes.
And all while these major societal changes are happening in the background.
Oh, absolutely.
Rise of public spaces, the explosion of printed materials, and this growing influence of artists and critics.
It's like all these different forces were converging, creating this perfect storm of ideas and innovations.
And out of this storm emerges a figure who really embodies this dynamic interplay of art, intellect, and social change.
Denis Diderot.
Diderot.
Right.
We've talked about his brilliant art criticism and his concept of rapport,
Of course.
but I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this fascinating guy.
He was truly a Renaissance man, a writer, a philosopher, an art critic, and a key figure in the Enlightenment.
He championed reason, progress, and individual liberty.
Absolutely.
And his approach to aesthetics was anything but conventional.
No, it wasn't.
He really pushed back against that idea of beauty as something fixed and absolute, didn't he?
He did. He really believed it was all about the viewer's experience, that
Yeah.
unique encounter between the individual and the artwork.
Exactly. He believed that beauty was a product of interaction,
Right.
a dialogue between the artwork and the observer.
Yeah, it wasn't just about what was on the canvas or the page.
Right.
It was about the connections, the rapports that the viewer made with it.
And to make those connections, you needed more than just your intellect.
You did.
You needed your senses, your emotions, your whole being.
Right. And that's where his concept of the sixth sense comes in.
Okay.
He argued that taste wasn't simply a matter of learning the rules or following the trends. It was a physical, almost instinctive response to art.
You feel it in your gut, you get chills down your spine, you're moved to tears.
It's a full-body experience.
It is.
And what's even more radical is that he didn't believe this sixth sense was limited to the elite. He argued that anyone with proper education and exposure to art could develop this refined sensibility.
So he's taking that idea of feeling that was circulating in the salons
Ah.
and democratizing it.
Exactly.
Saying that the experience of beauty is not bound by social class.
It's like he's throwing open the doors of the palace and inviting everyone in to feast on this incredible banquet of art.
I love that.
Right.
And his own writing embodies this spirit of inclusivity.
Absolutely.
He wrote about art in a way that was both insightful and accessible, blending sharp analysis with vivid descriptions and personal reflections.
He wasn't afraid to be subjective, to share his own emotional responses to the artworks he encountered.
And that's what makes his writing so engaging.
It is.
He's not just lecturing you, he's inviting you to join him on this journey of discovery,
Yeah.
to see the world through his eyes.
He was a master of using language to paint pictures with words.
Yes, he could make you feel like you were right there in the gallery with him, experiencing the texture of the brushstrokes,
Yes.
the play of light and shadow, the very essence of the artwork.
Absolutely.
So let's bring this back to that question we posed earlier. If beauty is in the eye of the beholder, how much does context and education shape our perceptions? Diderot seems to be saying that both are crucial.
Absolutely. He believed that we don't experience art in a vacuum. Our understanding is shaped by our knowledge, our experiences, and the cultural context in which we live.
It's like trying to appreciate a joke in a foreign language.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the nuances of the language and the cultural references, the joke will fall flat.
Exactly. And Diderot saw art criticism as a form of education,
Go.
a way to guide the viewer's eye and deepen their appreciation. By understanding the artist's intentions, the historical context, and the technical aspects of the work, the viewer could unlock a whole new level of meaning.
So it's not just about having a good eye or an innate sense of taste.
Right.
It's about cultivating a deeper understanding, a more informed way of seeing.
And that's where the art critic comes in,
Right.
acting as a bridge between the artist and the audience.
Precisely. And that's what makes Diderot such a fascinating and relevant figure.
He is.
He understood that aesthetics is a dynamic and evolving field, one that requires both sensitivity and intellect,
Yes.
both personal experience and critical engagement.
Absolutely.
And his legacy continues to inspire us to think critically about art, to challenge our own assumptions about beauty, and to embrace the richness and complexity of the aesthetic experience.
Because ultimately, the journey of exploring art is a journey of exploring ourselves.
It is.
It's about opening ourselves up to new possibilities,
Yeah.
to different ways of seeing and experiencing the world.
And that's a beautiful thing.
It is.
So as we wrap up our deep dives into 18th century French aesthetics, I want to leave you with this. Don't be afraid to explore, to question, and to embrace the beauty that surrounds you in all its forms.
Keep learning, keep experiencing, and keep those conversations about art alive and vibrant, because that's how we keep the spirit of Diderot and the other great thinkers of the 18th century alive, by continuing to ask those big questions,
Right.
to challenge our assumptions, and to embrace the endless possibilities of art.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll bring this deep dive to a close.
Thank you for joining us.
We hope you've enjoyed this journey through the world of 18th century French aesthetics.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the beauty of art alive in your heart and mind.